Live from Stockholm with a stack of platters that matter.
Hello, Jason. How is Stockholm treating you?
Who can say? Who can say?
I'm so happy that you decided to join us here for this little, can I say Thanksgiving, or is that, should we not say that word?
I mean, you say that now, Marty, but I don't know if I like your odds here, really. So, um, sure, why not? Hello.
Hello. We have so many people who have joined already, and I assume more
Mhm.
people will be joining us pretty soon. So I just want to start this wonderful conversation by saying thanks to everyone who sent tons of questions since
Oh my God,
yesterday.
there are a lot of questions here.
There's so many questions, and
There are like
we
hundreds of questions.
yeah, so we went through them, and I kind of categorized them a little bit in few different, basically like
Sure.
chapters of this conversation. So we're going to start with the storytelling questions, then we're going to get to the actual play questions, and then to some more
Okay.
general questions. How do you feel about that, Jason?
That sounds great. I think we will be guided by your wisdom here.
Alrighty. Well, I'm not sure if we are
I,
going
I
to. I
have to
mean,
I have to admit I'm stunned by there are hundreds of questions. So I'm amazed that you were able to distill these down into a spreadsheet. Thank you.
yeah. That's that was really fun. There was a lot of like there was, for example, one question that I'm not sure that we are going to answer today, but I really loved it,
Yeah.
which is whether you can do a backflip or not.
I mean, yes, but not survive.
Great. So, with that in mind, let us start. And we're going to begin with the storytelling and some little insight for our fellow storytellers here on the server with Arsenic Candy, who has asked, how long have
Arsenic
you been
candy.
a Yes, how long have you been a storyteller? And multiple other people asked if you have any advice for beginner storytellers.
So, first of all, arsenic candy is a terrific username. I'm impressed, really. That is fantastic. I feel that needs to show up in a Vampire the Masquerade Chronicle at some point. How long have I been a storyteller? You know, when people ask me that, the flippant, ironic answer I normally give is longer than you. But that's not really very helpful. So we're not going to give that answer today. I've been a Vampire the Masquerade storyteller since Vampire the Masquerade first arrived on the scene over 30 years ago in 1991. Yes, I am that old. It was Gen Con 1991, and from the moment the book got into my hands and I saw the red rose on the cover and flipped through the pages and read about the clans and the hunger and the beast and Chronicles, I knew these are the stories I wanted to tell. So that long.
That's
And
amazing.
the other part of the question was advice for beginner storytellers.
Yeah,
That
maybe
could be
something that would help you when you were starting.
so. Advice for beginner storytellers, I think, could be an entirely separate conversation that we should look at doing another day, because it's a multivariate topic, and there are as many different kinds of vampire chronicles and storytellers as there are vampires. So it's hard to give generic advice that is one size fits all. But if you're a brand new storyteller, just beginning or just thinking about it, I guess I would tell you these three things. One, trust yourself. The fact that you want to be a storyteller and want to be part of creating these stories and want to tell stories for your friends, that's 90% of the battle right there. Just wanting to do it is important. Number two, talk to your players and talk with your players. Have a frank, open, honest discussion about what you all want from your vampire story. Ask, what style of story do you want? Do you want it to be action adventure John Wick? Do you want it to be a political thriller? Do you want it to be strange new trade? Do you want it to be darkly romantic? Ask what each player's expectations and desires are. Find out from them what would make it an awesome game and go from there. I know that there's a reluctance to have that frank, honest, open discussion because we fear that it will take away some of the mystery of the story. But I think the reverse is true, honestly. I think the more you talk about it before you begin, the richer, deeper, and more exciting the story is once you start to tell it together. And the third thing I would say is check with your players as you go. At the end of the first session or even during the first session if you feel you need to, talk about what's going right. Don't be afraid to break the fourth wall, or any wall indeed. Talk about what you could be doing better. Talk about what we want to see next week. Okay, this story was awesome, but I would like it to have more action. I would like it to have less action. The more you talk together and communicate together, I think the more satisfying the experience will be for everybody. If you do those three things and everybody comes away from the table having fun and wanting more, you did it right. Does that
Yeah,
help?
I am sure it does. That was amazing. And we do have a lot of more questions from beginner storytellers,
Mm,
including Lucky Duck
sure.
Studios.
Lucky
Um,
duck. Okay. Well, is that different from a lucky swan? I'm not sure.
I'm not sure, but Lucky Duck is asking, what does your storyteller prep look like? Do you have sticky notes, pages of quotes?
I mean, we should be so lucky, right? Yeah. Um, my storyteller prep is generally bullet points. I like to write by hand or on a Google Doc or other handy electronic format a lot of bullet points. And I find that a very easy format because they scan visually very well. It's easy to look at bullet points very fast and pick out what is important and what is not, and to prioritize them, um, and to make notes around bullet points. Um, Sticky notes, I organize my entire working professional life in and around sticky notes. Just ask Marty about my desk. Um, Pages of quotes, not so much. I find because my own short term memory is so poor, I don't do well with remembering lots and lots of pages of quotes. I'll forget which page it was on. I don't know where I put it. So much of what I do is a combination of bullet points and terrified improvisation in the moment.
And speaking of improvisation, we have a question from Avarice Links, who asks something that a lot of community members are speculating about. What percentage of planning or discussion do you do with your players between sessions in preparations for a game? And how much of that is fully planned out or just more Cliff Notes approach to planning?
Sure.
What's
That's a question that I think a lot of storytellers and game masters, not just myself, get, because there is there is a level of intrigue and mystery around how much to prepare, because the answer is not scientific. And it varies from storyteller to storyteller. Many storytellers I know prepare in extraordinary detail that I could never hope to imagine. When I look at comrades in arms like Matthew Mercer or Brennan Lee Mulligan or Bria Iyengar or B. Dave Walters and see how they prepare, everybody's different. Nobody does it the same way. Everybody does it in the way that works for them specifically. And I think that every storyteller has to find their own method that works. Um, to answer the question directly, um, I talk with players between sessions quite a lot and before sessions quite a lot. But nothing is fully planned. It can't be. I don't know what they're going to do. I know where each episode begins. I know what the opening scene is. I know what the NPCs want and what they don't want. But the players have free agency. They can do whatever they want. And I just have to be prepared to interpret the world and what the world wants in reaction to what they decide. That
interesting?
might have been a longer answer than Avarice Links wanted.
I think that's a very good answer. But after you plan the Chronicle, it's time to start it. And Scratch Monkey has asked, how do you create a strong start for your Chronicles?
I think it depends on what the players are looking for and what you want to do as a storyteller. Many players want a chronicle that is a slow burn mystery thriller with lots of investigation and a very measured pace. Others want action adventure. Some want, a terrifying eldritch horror. And you have to gauge your starting scene according to player expectations and desires. If you don't know, if you haven't talked about it, if there hasn't been an opportunity to talk about it, if it's a one shot you haven't planned for, or nobody has a preference, I like to start with a strong frame and a call to action. And by that, I mean um, a story conceit. All the characters are X, and you're here to do Y. You are all small domain holders, and you're here to do a favor for the Baron. Or you've all been hauled before the Prince for judgment because you've all transgressed, allegedly, against some rule in the domain, and you must be called to account for it. Or if all else fails and you're really in doubt and you don't know what to do, I would say start the story in media res, in the middle of the scene, with action. Drop them all into a combat scenario or a desperate chase or pitch battle for survival, and let the story emerge from what the players decide in the moment. That's pretty hardcore, but it can yield really interesting chronicle results, and a lot of note taking as well.
That
I
is
think
really
that
fun.
I think that might I think that might answer a lot of questions from a lot of storytellers about where do I begin.
And now I really want to play in a chronicle with you one day where we start with a car chase or something exploding.
Yeah,
Uh, and speaking of backgrounds that you established before you start the game, and also Vampire the Masquerade having this very common theme of city being a character, I feel like
sure.
everyone can agree with the fact that you're doing this amazingly in your actual place with LA, with New York, with Seattle. I still remember that moment of Seattle by Night with the gum wall and how
The gum wall.
amazingly you described it.
Well, to be fair, that's because you had seen the gum wall the day before and you knew what I was talking about. But yes,
I feel like I felt more disgusted hearing you talking about it than actually seeing it. That was amazing.
it's a pretty grim and gruesome place, right?
It is. But with that in mind, Manticore Phantom asks tips for getting a fuller, richer idea of a city before running a chronicle in it.
Oh, good question. Manticore Phantom, and again, I'm in awe of all these usernames. I feel like I've kind of fallen down on the job here with mine because these are fantastic. Um, a fuller, richer idea of a city, and I'm going to try to answer the question that I think you're asking. And the question I think you're asking is, how do I help my players feel like they're there? That we really are in this place, mentally at least and emotionally, for the span of the time we're at the table together. How do I help them feel like we really are in Seattle or Istanbul or Prague or Singapore or Canberra or wherever we are in the world? Um, it isn't easy, but it's very rewarding, of course, and you have to kind of enlist your players to begin with. Um, every city has its own voice, its own character, its own mood. Much of that is available to us through basic internet searches. We live in a charmed time in which the sum total of all human knowledge and allegations are available to us at lightning speed through the internet. But sifting through that to the point where you can actually get enough information to run a chronicle without spending years at it is really challenging. And I think honestly, Fanacore Mantum, when you're up against it, less is more. I think that for each city, for each area, region, domain, pull out 3 to 5 basic facts, characteristics, traits, truths that you can run with and build on those. One of the biggest mistakes I think many beginning storytellers make, especially, is trying to detail everything. And you don't need to. You just need to give enough to convey a sense of place and ask your players for help in developing it as you go. If I was going to create a strong start for a richer, fuller idea of a city that I've never ever been to in my life, such as Marty, help me out. Pick a city I've never been to.
Oh
It
my
won't be.
goodness. Have you been to Poznań? You haven't been to Poznań, I think.
I don't think I have actually. I
Yeah.
would start on the internet. I would try to find 3 or 4 characteristics that define that city. I would look at YouTube to see how people see their city, videos of people walking through the city at night, especially. I would look for current news articles. I would look for literary essays, and I would look for user groups online on Discord, on any platform that are run by people who actually live there, and just try to tease out a bare handful of facts that make it feel like it's an inhabited place. I think another mistake that many storytellers make is that they're trying to recreate a city exactly, and you don't need to. You just need to create the impression of it and ask your players for help.
Great. And we also had one user who asked multiple really good questions. It was hard to pick. User,
Oh, okay.
yeah, Kenshiro.
And sure.
I Yeah, I picked one which I think is a lot of people are struggling with it, and we've heard a lot of questions about that. But what tricks can you use to develop interesting
Mm.
and tactical combat encounters in your role
Ooh.
playing?
Oh, yeah, good question. And it's a great question because, of course, Vampire the Masquerade in particular, World of Darkness in general, but Vampire the Masquerade in particular, is not a tactical combat simulation engine. That's not what it's built for, and that's not what it's good at.
Hmm.
So it can really be tricky if you've got a table full of players that is desperate to play a John Wick style adventure where the placement of the flower pot really matters in relation to the stairs. It's tougher because the game isn't set up to do that. The game is to set up to be slightly more cinematic and give you general impressions of things that you then riff on in the moment or riff off of, as the case may be. But some of the things that I do to create interesting tactical combat encounters is this, and I admit that I am cheating. Everybody got that? I am cheating here. Um, I think of my combats in terms of zones. So if my coterie is facing off against a bunch of ghouls who are running, say, a taxi cab repair station in the middle of New York City, I think of three zones. Zone one is what the players have immediately in front of them and can reach and around. It's the taxi cabs, the tools around them, the hydraulic lifts, and the various pieces of equipment immediately. Zone two is just beyond their reach. It's behind the next series of doors. That's got secrets they can't see, but has interesting terrain or features they could access if they can get to that zone. The zone beyond that is completely off the map and for them to discover once they get there. I know it's there, but they don't. It's the secret zone. And if you think of combat tactical encounters for Vampire in terms of zones, I think it will go much faster and easier for you. And I admit that that's not in the rules, but you asked how I think of it, and that's how I think of it.
That's interesting. I've never heard that explanation from yours. That's super cool. Um,
Yeah, I think zones are really interesting, and they work indoors or out of doors. Uh, you can add tactical features to zones. Zones that are close have things that can trip you up, or that you have to move around, jump on, jump over. Zones that are, if the zone is one number away, zone two, that's too far for you to reach in a round, but it's within combat range of, say, a thrown weapon or a pistol. And then zone three is beyond that. Once you start thinking in combat in terms of zones like that, tactical segregation for actions becomes a lot easier.
this sounds like you are talking about video game design. It's great how these things overlap with each other.
Well, I mean, we all play video games, right?
Yeah.
And I think that tabletop RPGs, one of the advantages of tabletop RPGs is that they happen in real time and they're collaborative. And many of the people at the table, if not all of them, have seen a movie or a TV show or played a video game. And the idea that combat happens in zones that are, let's say, near, close, and far is
Mhm.
is pretty common to all the media we enjoy. I don't say that it works for everybody, but that's how I make it more interesting.
I think it's a very useful answer. Thank you. And you are known for having a lot of personalities at your tables, a lot of really, really amazing characters and people behind these characters who can really breathe life into them. But Iris of the Valley is asking an interesting question. Do you have any
Mm.
tips or tricks to help quieter players feel comfortable and come out of their shell at the table?
Ooh, feel more comfortable and come out of their shell. Yes and no.
Okay.
Um, I think again, I'm going to answer the question that I think you're asking. Players who feel quieter or more reticent to engage or participate can feel that way for any number of reasons, and I think it's unfair to the player to guess in the moment. Better to have that conversation with the player in session zero or before and talk about What kind of play style do you prefer? What do you expect from this game? What can I do as a storyteller to make you feel comfortable and welcome and safe at the table? If you're in the game and you haven't had that conversation and the player seems quiet, I find it, I find for me, it's better to stop and say, are you feeling comfortable? Are you feeling engaged? Could I be doing anything differently for you? I realize that's not necessarily ordinary storyteller advice, but I've never found that it negatively impacts the flow of play to stop and say, everybody doing okay? Could I be doing anything differently to make today fun for you? Is there anything you need, or is there anything you'd like me to do differently? I find that 99% of the time, the quiet player will in fact respond and say, you know what? I'd like it if there was more of X, but less of Y, or more of Z, but a lot less of Q. Um, but there's a second part of this question, and that is that how do you help them come out of their shell? And the answer is I don't. Um, I think that the player gets to decide how far out of their shell they want to come. Once we've established that communication, that area of safety, that they understand that there's consent involved in every step of the story, and that they have the freedom to halt the action and express what they need or what they don't want. I find they find their own level, and it's not my role to bring them more or less out of their shell than they want to be. That makes sense?
Yeah, I appreciate this answer. I think it's really, really awesome that
I
it's
think
not
I
about
think
pushing people out, right?
honestly, I think of a. I mean, I've had players where I've had tables where players don't seem to engage much actively, but as long as they're checked in with and they feel safe and comfortable and they're having a good time, they come away from the table thinking this was a great experience. And
Yeah,
if you establish that level of trust during the game, and they know that they can say what they need, they'll come away thinking this is a great experience and I want to do it again.
that's a really cool answer. I like it. Thank you. And now, when it comes to your very memorable storyteller characters, Hadar Hunger of Vecna is asking, what makes a good storyteller character in your opinion?
Hate or hunger or Vecna. I know what Vecna is, but I don't know what hate or hunger or Vecna means. What makes a good story character is desires. They need to want things. It is good to want things. It's good for every character to want things, but it is especially important the storyteller characters want things. If they don't want things, they don't act. And if they don't act, they're not a good storyteller character. You need to know what they want, what they will do to get it, what lines they tell themselves they will not cross to get those things, and what happens if they do cross those lines. If you understand those strong motivations and the limitations, they're a great storyteller character. I know exactly what Fiorenza wants, what she will do to get it, what she won't do, what she tells herself she won't do, and what
Hmm,
actually happens if she does it anyway.
that is great. And
You say
we're
that now, but we haven't seen Fiorenza unleashed yet.
I am afraid. I am very, very
As
afraid.
as well you should be.
We're jumping a little bit in the level of let's
Surely.
say experience in storytelling right now because we're jumping into
Yeah.
a question that is way more specialized, let's say, and something that storytellers on the advanced level deal with. From Moonshuga asking, how do
Mm.
you make things like managing resources, acquiring property, and maintaining domain engaging and immersive? It's a big part of Vampire, but it's hard to weave it in those story rich stories in which everything just happens one after another, right?
What a great question. It really is moon sugar, which sounds like just the greatest cocktail recipe name ever. Um, the the short answer is that yes, it is very difficult to do that seamlessly at the table in the middle of the action because the truth is that resources, property, domain, um, contacts, allies, influences are abstract ideas that don't have precise mechanical applications in the moment. My experience has been that they are most effective in the downtime. And by downtime, I mean when the spotlight is off the immediate action of the table, not necessarily between game sessions, although that is a great time to work with your players on what they're doing in that area of vampire. But whenever there is a lull in the action, it is never a bad idea to swing the spotlight over and say, okay, you've all done this terrible thing, which you're going to pay for later. But in the meantime, let's talk about how your allies, your contacts, your influences might respond to it, what you might be doing with them in the meantime. Do any of you contact your touchstones? How are you managing your domain? Um, is your portillon affected by the situation that you've just experienced? You blew up an entire street. What happens to the access to mortals in your area? Um, yeah, observed more in the in the breach, right? Um, it is hard to quantify those things as hard and fast rules in the middle of the action. And so I understand Moon Sugar's question. So story heavy sessions don't have a lot of room for those, but I think it's worthwhile to use the breaks between intense scenes to check in with players on how they might be engaging with those parts of their character sheets, and especially between games. You could even
Indeed.
make a complete mini game out of many of these traits. Gosh, that's probably a separate conversation we should do another time. How do we use allies, contacts, and influences and domain as a mini game?
This is again video game design. I love this. It's
It
so
really,
funny.
it actually really is video game design because I'm bringing in some video game design elements into my storytelling, which may or may not be fair. I'm not sure. You
This
be
is
the judge.
actually a very good push towards a lot of storytellers out there. Hey, if you want to do game design, maybe you're a good person to do it. Maybe you want to dabble in it. So speaking of adding some more game elements, mini games into
Yeah.
your stories, Soren has noticed that you have been using occasionally mortals to inject a little bit of levity into your chronicle. Why do you think they are so effective as a contrast to player character vampires?
Oh, wow. Soren, great question. I mean, I'm going to answer the question on two levels. I'll answer it on the obvious level and then maybe on the less obvious level. The obvious level is they're alive. They enjoy the full gamut of human experience and emotion. They breathe, they blink, they sleep, they eat, they shop, they go to school, they brush their teeth. They have to deal with difficult bosses. They got to shop for groceries. They go to the movies. They are part of the living, breathing world, and they outnumber vampires by billions to one. They're the norm, and they are the baseline of experience in the world of darkness, because, of course, the world of darkness is our world, but with the supernatural overlaid on top of it. Um, Mortals, I think, remind us of who we are as viewers in actual plays, but they remind us of who we are when we're players at the table as well. I'm very fond of starting my actual plays by reminding the players at the table that when the sun was in the sky that day, the humans of the city, the mortals, went about their day. They got out of bed, they brushed their teeth, they kissed their kids goodbye as they went on to school, they went to a job, or maybe they worked from home, they went shopping, they walked the dog. And all this time, their lungs are breathing, their eyes are blinking, their hearts are beating. They're human, they're alive. They're experiencing the world as only humans can. And in a way, that is funny when you contrast it with the undead situation that the vampire is thrust into. The vampire has been stuck in this situation, probably not by choice. And the situation is absurd. They're part of this unliving neo feudal society that is existing outside the norm of humanity that they know. And that's kind of funny. You can't help but laugh at the idea of humans rubbing up against vampires in a situation where the humans have no idea what's going on. The irony almost writes itself. Sometimes the humor is a little darker, maybe, and sometimes it's not. But I think there's plenty of room for there's plenty of room for a smile and an ironic laugh whenever humans who are just living their lives have to butt up against the supernatural in our world.
When you
I don't
said,
know if that was helpful or not, but there
when you
we are.
Yeah, when you said, it sometimes gets darker, I just reminded myself of one of
Sure.
the moments of your actual play, Chronicles, in which
Well, I
you
mean, yeah, think about it.
struggle
You
with
know,
it.
you're a person minding their own business. You're at a club or at the shopping mall or walking their dog, and suddenly, through random chance, through fateful cock up, whatever, suddenly you are forced to confront the supernatural. This is a vampire, and they're going to drink your blood, or they are a werewolf, and they're going to ask directions to the nearest bus station, or it's a hunter hot on the trail of some ghost in your neighborhood. And I think there's this weird, ironic blinking time shift where the mortals realize the world is not what I thought it was. The story that I'm telling with my life is not the story we're actually telling. And there is drama there and there is fear, but there's also humor. It can be delicate sometimes, but I think it's worthwhile to explore, especially as a counterpoint to what can be very, very serious consequences and drama in our world of darkness.
That's great. And we have a very nice question, which I loved reading it. And thank you so much, Calder, for asking this one. What are some things players can do to make the job of a storyteller easier? We want to help you out. What do we
Oh,
do?
Calder, thank you. On behalf of storytellers everywhere, we are grateful for your question. I don't know who's Calder storyteller is, but I think they get one extra die in their pool to their next role, whatever that may be, for sure. What are things players can do to make the job of a storyteller easier? Let's say three easy things and then three things that are a little bit more difficult. One, please take notes. I can't speak for every storyteller, but my short-term memory is terrible, and I can't take notes fast enough to keep up with my imagination. So, players who take notes about what's going on are worth their weight in hunger dice for me. Number one. Two. Have an ambition. Have a goal. Make sure you fill out the parts of your character sheet that say ambition and desire. Want to do something. Can be short term. I want to steal the prince's car. I want to seduce the princess ghoul. I want to open a new pizza parlor, whatever. It can be super short term and it can be very long term. I want to become prince. I want to find who murdered my sire. I demand to know the secret of whether Cain or Lilith is our progenitor. Have those goals, pursue them actively, pursue them eagerly. That's number two. And number three, be generous to your other players. Um, it's a tabletop role playing games in general, and Vampire in particular, are collaborative stories. They emerge in the moment together. And the more generous you are to your fellow players at the table, the more fun you will have. A very smart player who may or may not play Nosferatu sometimes with us at my tables once described it as getting the ball, doing something fun and interesting with the ball, and then immediately handing the ball to another player at the table so that they can do something fun and interesting with it. And I find that's always true. The more generous you are with the spotlight, the more it comes back to you and the more fantastic fun you're going to have. And now, three things that you might not think of. Check in with your storyteller. After the game is over, ask how they felt about it. Did they feel it went well? Do they have any regrets? Are they okay with the emotional aspects and dimensions of it? To ask them about what their plans are for the next story. Do they feel they have a direct plan, or they need more communication from the players? And three, bring snacks. We like snacks. Snacks are good.
What is your favorite snack on the during the actual play?
Do I mean, is there some doubt? I mean, let's see. When a bottle of Good Red is not appropriate, I really like I like raw vegetables and dips like hummus or something like that. That's really good. Crunchy carrots, celery, radishes, that sort of thing. Things that have a lot of cellulose that make a lot of snappy, crunchy noise.
You heard it, folks. If you will ever play with Jason, make sure to bring your veggies.
Yeah, veggie
Right.
yeah, or a bottle of red.
Or a bottle of red. We're going to go back to talking about the red. By the way, everyone, thank you so much for listening. We are slowly getting to the end of the storytelling part of this conversation. Soon we will move to actual play questions and then
Yeah.
general questions, which you've asked. But we had one question, or actually multiple questions from multiple users, which I assembled into one.
Mm.
Um, how do you go about writing a chronicle when you aren't familiar with the city? And would you consider running a streamed chronicle in a place you haven't lived in? And we had examples like Brazil or Spain. Would you ever consider that?
I would consider it, but I would be careful. Um, if we're running Chronicle in the here and now, right? There are chronicles that are here and now, and there are chronicles that are then and far historical. That's an entirely different conversation. But if we're talking about here and now, would I consider running a chronicle in a place I haven't lived in? I would, but I'd be cautious about it. Um, you want to honor the place and the people who live there because every place we could visit on this globe has its own different tone, rhythm, customs, beliefs, and characteristics, and you want to do justice to it. And there's only so much you can learn through internet research, YouTube videos, movies, whatever. I think you're perfectly fine in running chronicles to a place you've never visited, as long as you give it that respect. Um, don't just buy into the stereotypes of a place. Dig a little deeper. Do some research online. Read books, or better yet, even read magazines that are published in that place, most of which are readily online. I don't think it's any secret that one of the things I like to do is I like to look for YouTube videos of people who wander around their cities with cameras or GoPros stuck to their heads and talk about what they see. I've spent a lot of time in my life in New York City, but I haven't spent as much time in the Bronx as I have spent in other boroughs. And so for New York by Night, I watched, I don't know, it must have been at least 100 hours of videos of people walking around the Bronx at night with their cell phone cameras or GoPros, just talking to people in the borough about what's life at night like here. What do you think is happening? What do you see? What do you smell? What are your concerns? And that helped me, I think, find a sense of place. There are very few major cities in the world where you can't find that kind of resource online. If you're thinking about running a city that is so far beyond your experience that there isn't much information on it online, then I think it's time to talk to people who actually do live there or have been there and get their opinions from it and think about, why am I telling the story in this kind of place? Is it because I think the story really needs to be here? Or do I just think it sounds different enough that I want to explore it sight unseen? Um, the only thing else I'll add to that is that other role playing games set in the modern age can often be a resource. There are a lot of books written for other role playing games that you can tap into that provide you information about cities you haven't visited from a game design standpoint that can be useful. That was
Great.
kind of rambling, Marty. I'm sorry.
No, that was great. I'm enjoying this. I feel like,
Oh, are you? Oh, excellent. Good. Well, as
yeah.
long as you're enjoying it, mission accomplished. Great.
I hope
Fantastic.
other
I'll see you in the office tomorrow. Great.
I hope other folks are also enjoying it as much as I am. But this is actually something that I am struggling with, and I wonder if you have some tips on this. From Child of Malcav, there's a question: do you
Yeah.
have any tips on ending a chronicle and
Mm.
handling the loose threads that may happen?
Oh, yes and no. Wow, what a great question. It's hard. It's really difficult when it's time to say goodbye. Um, I'm going to answer the question in reverse. I don't handle loose threads. I think it's absolutely okay, arguably important, that not every story get resolved neatly with final knowable answers. I realize that's a conceit we have inherited from the media we consume. All stories must pay off, and they must have concrete, definable answers that are definitive and irrefutable at the end of the 60 minutes or the 8 episodes of the season, or however long it is, or how many movies it is. But the world of darkness is our world, and in our world, that's not how stories work. They have messy endings. Endings are always more messy than the beginning. You know where you are with the beginning, but endings are always messy, messy things. And it's okay, I think, not to wrap them all up neatly in a bow. Um, I look at my colleagues again, my touchstones, my inspirations, Bria, Brennan, Matthew. They don't wrap things up neatly in a bow. There are unanswered questions. There is vagueness. Things are open to interpretation when they conclude. I think that's not only okay, I think it's required to remind us that these vampires, these kindred, live in this world, the world we inhabit, where concrete answers beyond refute are few and far between. I think that only adds to the drama and kind of heightens the humanity of their experience. I realize that may be a heretical point of view, but I do believe it.
That's beautiful. Um, and
Oh,
speaking
thank you. Well, I'm glad you recorded it.
no, it's really nice. I like the the little pat on the back on all of us storytellers who have not tied all of the loose threads.
No,
It's like it's
I
okay.
don't think you should feel obliged at all. When I end a chronicle, I talk to my players and I say, "This is ending. We're nearing the conclusion. What would you choose for your character? All things being equal, what's the perfect resolution for you? How do you want your character's story to end, given what we know?" And I will try to give an ending that approximates that. I can't guarantee it because other characters may have other ideas about how they want things to end, and they may be at cross purposes to yours. Or the events of the story that have been set in motion may demand recognition that don't allow the perfect end to your story. But I would try to take the player's desires and wishes into account too. Um, when players have different endings that clash, sometimes you can resolve it by talking to the players together and saying, "These endings don't work together. What do we do?" 9 times out of 10, my experience has been the players are eager to find a compromise. Um, and sometimes the players will say, "Look, I don't care. I'm happy. End it as you see fit." But just as it is with the beginning of the chronicle, that communication at the end is important too.
Great. And as much as we will touch upon some storytelling subjects later, I want to conclude the storytelling section of our conversation with this extremely important question, slightly reiterated from
Mhm.
Ralospec. Ralospec, I hope you will forgive me because you are going into very great detail, and I think this is a really cool conversation in general. But we've had a recent topic in the community and talking a lot about bleed at tables.
Yeah, absolutely.
We talk a lot of players bleed,
Yes.
but is
Mhm.
bleed something that also affects storytellers? And do you have
Yeah.
any tips on managing it and remaining empathetic with your players as you do so?
Wow, what a terrific question.
Yeah,
Uh, Thank you, Ralisovic. Did I say that right? Ralisovic. Excuse me. Um, what a great question. And this too could be a subject of a completely different conversation, right? I don't know if
yeah,
we have enough time to cover it completely here. The short answer is yes, bleed absolutely affects storytellers. Um, my long experience through the millennia that I've been a storyteller is that bleed is a neutral thing that happens, and that storytellers are subject to it just as much as players are, for better and for worse, positive and negative. And how we manage it really, is the measure of us. Um, I have a number of different methods that I use to manage bleed from my tables. It always starts with a check-in at the very end of a session. How did we do? How is everyone feeling? What are you getting from your emotions here? What are your feelings telling you? And my players do the same for me. Very recently, we were recording Seattle by Night, and we had some very intense scenes. If you're not watching it on Twitch or YouTube, you should, because as the season progresses, some of the scenes get extraordinarily intense and deal with very heavy subjects. And at the end of each episode, we stopped deliberately to check in with each other, and my players checked in with me to make sure I was feeling okay and that I was processing my emotions uh, in a positive way. Um, when I feel bleed affecting me positively or negatively, I like to write it out. I keep a journal that is exclusively for gaming, quite apart from my business journal. I write out the feelings I get there. I talk to other players about them. I talk to my colleagues. I think Marty is probably tired of hearing my
No,
conversations about the
never.
stories I run. It's like, and then my players did this, and I felt this way. But that is very important, I think, to share those with friends, confidants, and colleagues, and to be very aware that we can feel bleed in either direction, positive, negative, neutral, up, down, X, Y axes, and that it can affect us as people. We are, unlike the characters we're telling stories for, merely people. And those sorts of emotions can affect us and are very important. I find that it makes me a very better storyteller when I'm empathetic with my players. But it's very important to recognize too that it requires self care as well.
Great. Thank you so much for answering this one and talking a
Yeah,
little bit about it because I
I
feel like,
that
yeah.
that's a great conversation. We should probably do more with later. I'd be happy to have a totally separate conversation like this about bleed aspects for storytellers.
Yeah, and well, with that in mind, let us jump into the topic of actual plays, and let's start.
Oh dear.
I will jump a little bit into a very concrete question, something that people are asking here and there. I hear people talking about it on all the social media platforms that I follow and check, and that is Seattle by Night. And the question about Seattle, which is specifically from 777. How much is Seattle by Night podcast considered canon, and will it
Ooh.
relate to Bloodlines 2?
Hmm. We don't have that kind of time, so let me sum up. Yes, excellent question. What the characters in Seattle by Night are going through right now, what they are experiencing, their trials and tribulations with Tully and Nix and Evangeline and trying to get an audience with Lou and the Macumbar and all the Thin Bloods and Benny and all of that are directly related to Bloodlines 2. Think of it, I guess, as a kind of a prelude. These are things that are happening immediately before the action of Bloodlines 2 begins. And when you play Bloodlines 2, you will immediately see the connections. Um, they may not be obvious today as you're watching Seattle by Night, but they are there and they are direct. Um, As for the peripheral events that happen around Seattle by Night, like what's happening with Tacoma, is Prince Gravenstein canon? That I don't know that I particularly can answer. That we might have to ask our Bloodlines 2 colleagues what their opinion is. But certainly, everything that's happening to the characters once they set foot in Seattle is related directly and irrevocably to the action in Bloodlines 2. When you watch Seattle by Night, you are watching the Bloodlines prelude.
That is super exciting.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah. You say that now, but we're only halfway through the season, and you don't see what happens to Betty next. So
oh
we'll see.
no,
I know,
everyone,
right? Right, Betty's. If you haven't watched episode 4, Betty's having a rough time of it at the moment.
I feel like we have to start making notes from these episodes and try to compare them
Yeah,
later.
yeah. I think that's a very good idea.
All right.
There's
And
even if you watch for it, if you really watch for it, and you gotta pay super close attention, there are connections from Seattle by night to LA by night and New York by night as well, but they are super subtle.
ooh,
I know, right?
I'm going to poke Hadi about this. I'm sure Hadi will tell me.
I mean, if anyone can see them, Huddy can.
Amazing. And we have a question from Tina that is
Mhm.
like a little bit more about storytelling here, but I feel like it plays well into what you do with your awesome actual plays. So, in series like LA by Night or New York by Night, players rarely speak out of character, and the tone is usually
Yeah,
very subtle and serious.
sure.
So, how do you do this as a storyteller, and how do you
Huh.
avoid making your Chronicle into what we do in the shadows?
Well, first, I wanna say there's nothing wrong with a chronicle that has what we do in the shadows as its tone. I think if you watch Seattle by Night, you'll see a lot more dark humor, than you would if you were watching LA by Night or New York by Night, right?
Mhm.
Um, Vampire is a very big umbrella game, and there is room for so many different tones and moods and ambiances, from dark humor to hardcore humor, from high drama to Shakespearean drama, and everything in between. So there isn't a wrong way to play it, but nonetheless, Tina's question is excellent, and that is if you want to do something at your home table that is closer to LA by Night or New York by Night, where players are in character most of the time, rarely break the fourth wall, and even rules questions are in character, it requires communication and a shared desire to do it. Not everybody wants to do that. For LA by Night, I like to think I don't know if we pioneered this kind of actual play tone, but certainly it was different at the time than what was being done. Um, I talked to the players beforehand and I explained what I hoped to achieve. I was very clear with B Dave and Alex and with Cynthia Marie and Erica. I'd like to try something that's somewhere between the tabletop we all know and love and live action role playing LARP. Live action tabletop. LARP top was the term that I coined at the time. I'd like us to all try to stay in character as much as possible, try to break the fourth wall as little as possible. Even when you're asking rules questions, let's try to keep it in character if we can. But it was an experiment. We didn't know if it would work, and we didn't know if it would convey the kind of tone we wanted for the story we wanted to tell together. As it happened, it did work, and we figured out how to do it. If you want to do that at home, I cannot recommend strongly enough talking to your players first and saying, I'd like to try something very high drama or very serious in which we all try to stay in character most of the time, break character seldom, and here's how we'll handle rules questions. You may find your players don't want to do that, or they're uncomfortable doing it, or they're super excited about trying it and want to experiment with it. If you do it, my further recommendation is to be flexible at the table, and find your own comfort zone and level. Every table is different, every group is different, and finding the style and tone of play that works best for you and that gives you the most fun is where you win. I don't think it's necessary to copy exactly LA by Night or any other game in order to have fun. It's much more important to share the story that you want to tell together.
That's really fun.
My answers are getting longer, I swear, Marty.
That's great. I'm enjoying this. Like it's a deep dive into the brain of Mr. Note Taker. You know.
Excuse, I beg your pardon. I'm sorry. I woke up with a little bit of a cold and a cough today. I'm sorry.
Oh no! Thank you so much for being with us. Despite that, I hope that we're not going to
No,
tire
no,
you
no,
with questions.
no, no. This is awesome. I mean, I have big opinions, so go for it.
Awesome. So speaking of big opinions, Thanks Feathers asks, what is the
Yeah,
character concept that was extremely unexpected but ended up being a personal favorite of yours? Do you have any?
sure. Fiorenza. I had no idea what I was going to do. I had this very very vague idea in my head of what she was. I had sort of a paragraph of write up to begin with, and then in the moment, we had to bring Fiorenza to life, and I did not know what I was going to do. It was about, you know, zero point 0.7 seconds of decision about how will we do this in a way that will be fun and cool and memorable for people, but also good for the players and to give them an idea because we hadn't talked about it. We hadn't talked about Fiorenza beforehand. I knew that the player, B. Dave Walters, knew that Fiorenza could come into play because they had a connection, but he had no idea what I was going to do with it. And it was a very spur of the moment decision about how to characterize it. And sometimes that works, right? That spur of the moment, go for it, go for broke moment creates something much larger than you thought it would be. And I don't know how to describe this, um, but you know it when you feel it. You know when it lands well, when your players are having fun with it, when they're engaging with it, when they want to build on what you have offered to them in a way that is fun. You know that you've done something cool. So I think that's probably the best example I can think of at the moment.
And we all
Totally
love
unexpected.
Fiorenza. Yeah,
Fiore
it was
Fie
great.
Fiorenza is, yeah, she should probably be a ringtone, right?
Yes,
She has her own life, and she scares even me,
we should make a collection of ringtones of Fiorenza for people.
right? So, but she was extremely unexpected. I had no idea what was gonna come out of my mouth before I said it.
Wow, it's like you were possessed by the ghost of Fiorenza Savona.
"Hey, look, this was live on camera, right?" You have to remember that the LA by Night, the first 3 seasons we did were absolutely live. There was no room for error. It was like, what, the 1950s era of television when if you made a mistake the entire country saw it. So
Amazing.
you really the adrenaline racing through your system, I think, created some strange happy coincidences.
Speaking of happy coincidences, Sashal is asking, do you have any favorite moments from LA by Night that you'd like
Oh
to
my
share?
gosh. I mean, over 5 seasons, where to begin? We don't have that kind of time, so let me sum up. I mean, all of my actual plays, LA by Night, New York by Night, Seattle by Night, the one shots I've done with Rolling Stone and IGN and others, they're all a joy, right? Because they all help add an additional layer of cool, interesting drama and action to Vampire the Masquerade. So they're all fun. But favorite moments. I have two favorite moments I'll talk about briefly from LA by Night. Number one, um, the episode in which I set the character's haven on fire was. Honey will know exactly what season and episode that was off the top of her head because I don't. Uh, but if she's listening, she will know. Um, I told the players absolutely nothing. They just sat down and they noticed some weird lights at the foot of their tables, and I just said, "Oh, those are there from the previous show. I don't know what those are for." And we started the show and we turned the lights on, and I told them, "Your haven's on fire. You better do something fast." That was great because the players were terrified and they knew that they could die because they had no plot or script immunity, and that drama, I think, really shone through. The second most memorable moment, again, relied on secrecy, and that was when Taliesin dropped in as Annabelle's sire. When Erica Ishii and I created the character of Annabelle, Erica was very clear about what she wanted. She said, "I don't want to know anything. I don't know much about Vampire the Masquerade yet. I want to help the audience learn vampire through me. So let's not let my character know a great deal of information, including maybe who sired me." It was a difficult, violent moment. I don't have a clear recollection. Maybe it will come back to me, but don't tell me who my sire is. Surprise me. So I said, okay. And
Wow.
he's like, okay, you say that. All right, fine. And so, of course, my first call was to Taliesin and said, do you want to do this? And Taliesin, being who he is, said, of course, yeah, damn right I do. Give me a character sheet. So I gave him the character sheet in the background, and I said, do your worst. And I dare say that Taliesin took the worst character I've ever written and made it even more horrific. And on the night we filmed that episode, we didn't say anything. Taliesin was just there on the set, as he was many times before. Nobody thought anything of it. And the moment the audience learns who the sire is the moment that Erica and the cast learn. When Taliesin walks into the set, sits down, and says, "This is me," that's when we all know that
Wow.
that kind of impact is really difficult to pull off well. And if it wasn't Taliesin, I'm not sure we could have done it as effectively, because I trusted him absolutely implicitly. I knew I could just hand him the sheet in the background and say, "Do your worst, buddy," and he did. And the moment it created, I think, was exemplary of what Vampire the Masquerade can be in terms of almost Shakespearean drama.
That's amazing. I love hearing the story. And poor
I'm
Erica.
not sure I've ever told that before, actually. Not in that way. There's more to it,
Wow.
but we don't have time for that kind of stuff tonight. So maybe another evening.
Okay, now we have to have another evening because this is too fun.
There's more to it, actually.
We have multiple users asking
Oh
you
dear.
about some things that you previewed from LA by Night and New York by Night when you were like
Yeah.
posting some notes, posting your table. People were able to see your masquerade tracker, as well as, of course, hear the way that you do the beast of each of the players. How do you use them in the game? Where did the idea come from?
Mm. Those are, Marty, those are two really different questions. Can I give two different answers?
Of course, let's start with the masquerade tracker.
Um, the Masquerade Tracker is an idea that came to me when we were building Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition, and we decided that certain traits on the character sheet would be tracked, like willpower. It would be a set of boxes that could, tick off according to certain conditions being met in the game, like humanity, like damage, like health. And as conditions worsened, the consequences become more dire. And I think it was at the beginning of season 2 of LA by Night when I realized, oh, we're in the middle of a scene here. They're doing something that is risking the masquerade if there's anyone to see it. We should be tracking this. How do I do it? So I quickly scrawled 5 boxes on a piece of paper in front of me, and I decided in the moment that this is the masquerade tracker. And if certain conditions are met, it takes damage. If other conditions are met, it takes aggravated damage. I had already had in mind that I knew that the Second Inquisition was watching. I knew the FBI and Agent Handler were in the city. We had seen them before in a vignette, but they didn't know much yet. And I decided that with every risk the characters took that met a certain set of conditions, the masquerade tracker would take damage, just like health, just like willpower. And when a certain level of damage was reached, an event would trigger. I can't tell you that I planned this very cleverly beforehand with lots of preparation. It was a very spur of the moment idea that I latched onto quickly because I needed to find a way to make sure that there were consequences for actions that were happening in real time live on screen. And that's what I came up with. Sometimes terrified desperation gives you really great answers. And believe me, for all the seasons that we were live, Terrified Desperation was my co-pilot.
It's interesting because I think it also happened before Hunter the Reckoning danger system was developed. So
Yes,
it kind of fits into it.
it does. I mean, Justin Keeley, who is the developer of that book, and I had a long, lengthy conversation about how do trackers of that sort work? How can you bring them into play? What are the consequences of them? And so, a very tiny amount of the work that I did on that, I think, made its way into Hunter.
That's great. And well, now about the beast. People were asking, do you talk with
Ooh,
your players first about what kind
no,
of a tone their beast should have, or no?
no, no, absolutely
Mm,
not, never.
okay.
Um, uh, Full disclosure, of course, this isn't something that is explicit in Vampire the Masquerade in any edition, not in 5th edition or before. But it's something I've been doing since you know, since the Medicis were in charge of Renaissance Italy. Um, I have always done this. Uh, since I first started Vampire the Masquerade way back when, I always felt that the beast was a voice, a persona, a second consciousness, and should be felt at the table. That the beast should manifest in some physical way. And the reason I felt that way is because I felt it helped the player understand the relationship between humanity and the beast and to make it more visceral and immediate and make the consequences more real. And so I've been doing this for a very long time. When we did LA by Night season 1 and the cameras were rolling live and we got to the moment where we had our first failed hunger check, it never occurred to me not to do it because I'd always been doing it. It always seemed to me obvious that the beast should be a persona that manifests in times of stress and desperate need. Generally, the beast is the voice of the sire of the character, but not always. Sometimes the beast is the sire of somebody very, very important to the character that they've disappointed, or that they've wronged, or that has been in some sort of important object lesson in the character's I beg your pardon, in the character's life or unlife. But generally it's the sire or the grandsire.
Interesting. Well,
And honestly think it provides a really poignant counterpoint to to the situation of humanity that the character is in. Here you are, suspended in unlife. You're outside the natural order. Nothing about you makes sense. Absolutely nothing. There is no scientific law that can explain what you are or how you are. That's Carl Sagan can't help you here. And worse than that, there is this weird metaphysical presence in your head urging you to do terrible things in moments of stress and weakness. To me, that is the height of personal horror that Vampire promises.
so to
I
dig
mean,
deeper,
I
uh,
I wouldn't want to hear the beast in my head, would you?
yeah, to dig deeper, the reason why you are not talking with your players about it beforehand is the horror element of it, right? You want them to be scared of their beast that comes out of nowhere as a SPC, basically.
I mean, I don't want to scare the players, I mean, consent and safety at the table is super important. I wouldn't do anything that the players had already indicated wasn't appropriate for them
Of
or
course.
wasn't within their comfort zone. But what I want to do is I want to introduce an unexpected element to them that they get to play with. Suddenly they hear the beast for the first time at the table and they get to decide how to react. Am I defiant? Am I quiescent? Am I subservient? Am I angry? Am I loving? How do I react when I hear this beloved voice or hated voice in my head? Um, the player gets the agency of how to respond and what they want to do with it. The player can always say, I totally run with what the beast is going to tell me and give into it. Or they can be defiant and reject the beast. And that drama plays out at the table. It's super important that whatever voice the beast has, the agency of how to act in the moment still stays with the player. The beast can't make the player do anything.
That's awesome. I love this. I'm
I
definitely. I
mean,
feel like a lot of people.
I love it too. I realize it isn't canonical, but it's hard for me to imagine playing vampire without it.
Honestly, I think because of you, a lot of people have adopted this in their chronicles, and it's been more widespread
Oh,
in
awesome!
Vampire.
I'm glad to hear it.
Well,
I think it's a lot of fun.
I'm going to conclude the actual play chapter of our conversation with a question that was asked the most often and is being
Mm.
asked everywhere, and that is, of course, any news about the next season of New York by Night.
Yes, of course. So I have the most amazing and best players in the world at my table. They're very patient with me. They're super generous, and they realize that things don't always align the way we would want them. What I can tell you at the moment is that New York by Night season 3 is definitely going to happen. it's in pre-production right now, and what that means is story development, set development, studio creative development is happening. It's happening a little bit more slower than I would like. I'm confident in saying we will have pre-production pretty much worked out before the end of this year, well, at least by Christmas. And and unfortunately, although we thought we would get the first episodes live and online this year, they're going to happen in Q1 next year. When I think that every single one of the characters you've come to love and or hate in New York by Night will be present for season 3.
Thank you so much for answering this one. I know it's been very stressful to make sure that everything is done on time and with everything that you have to do
I
in order to make this. But yeah,
absolutely. I wish it were faster. And to be absolutely clear and transparent, all the delay is on me, and on the studio and on scheduling and things beyond the control of mortals or immortals, and nothing more than that.
all right. Thank you so much, Jason, for this info. We are going to wait for New York by Night to come back early next year. And now to conclude with general questions,
Mm.
and I'm going to start with a little bit of a, I don't know, sad one maybe, from Elmerg, who asked, "What's your biggest regret with World of Darkness? If there was one thing that you could
Mm.
pack from any edition, whether you were involved or not, what would
Ah,
that be?" I know.
ooh, where to begin? Elmer, you don't play fair, whoever you are. Hmm, biggest biggest regret from any edition, whether I was involved or not. Oh, this is where I get to blame other people, huh?
No, okay,
No,
if you want.
let's not do that. Let's
I
not
try
do
not
that.
to be ministry towards you. I'm not going to be like, "Yes, do it,
Mm,
do it."
no, that's not in my nature. Let's have radical transparency and be very clear and honest about this. I think if I could go back and do anything over again in all the years and all the editions I've been involved with, it would be probably to make character creation easier, faster, and more understandable in Vampire 5th edition. Um,
Yeah,
I'm super crazy proud of everything we've done in 5th edition. In many ways, it is, a culmination of so many years of learning and experience and trial by error for Vampire. But I think in many ways, our ambition exceeded our time limit. And the character creation part of V5, if you just open the core book and read it, is not easy. It's not as friendly as it should be. Now, fortunately, we have benefits like things that you've created, Marty, flow sheets, spreadsheets, infographics that show people how to create a character super fast and easy. We have the benefit of the clan quiz, again, that you've created that can help new vampire players find the clan that most reflects what they want to play quickly. We have the player's guide, which redefines character creation into something much more uh, quick and easy. And we have the advantage of things like Demiplane, the Vampire Nexus, which has our online character generation and creation management system, which is, I don't know about you, fellow storytellers, but for me, it's really a cane send. I've like transcribed every single NPC I've ever run into Demiplane already.
yeah.
Huge time saver for me. Um, yeah, I think that's the one. That's the biggest regret I have is that we didn't make it simpler, faster, and easier.
Yeah, understandable. I want to shout out here because I've recently checked out because at home I have the old V5 core books, which I got
Mm,
at the
yeah,
very beginning when V5 released. And when I was in the office, I checked the new version from Renegade, the reprint, and it actually does
yeah,
have summarized character creation at the end, which I haven't noticed
it
before.
does.
So I was happy to see
It
it.
it does. It's on the flyleaf at the end before the end papers, but even so, I think that if time, chance, the stars had aligned a little bit better, excuse me, um, we would have made the character creation process just easier and faster if we
Yeah.
had a choice.
Sure. And now we had multiple users asking you about your personal view on different editions of Vampire the Masquerade. And yeah, there's a lot of questions about that. We have, people here who play all the editions, basically. And we also recently had a very interesting survey in the community on X/Twitter from, I believe Tia was the one who made it originally, which
Oh
was
yeah, it's yeah.
what do you want from fifth
Mm.
edition survey? So people are wondering what would you like to see in fifth edition, and is there anything from the previous
Ooh.
editions that you miss that you would like to
Oh
see
my.
reintroduced?
Oh my goodness. Ask somebody else. Ask anybody else, please. To be fair, yes. Okay. If I could wave a magic wand and do anything, um, are there magic wands in World of Darkness? There certainly are, but I think the technocracy frowns on those sorts of things. Um,
Great reference, chat height.
yeah. Hey, you know what? The legendary napkin is right here with me. As a matter of fact, I'm looking right at it.
Oh no, we're going to have
I'm looking right at it right now.
the Discord is
Um,
going to blow out with Mage discussion for the next week. Jason, what have you done?
we can talk about the napkin that's in front of me as we close out, but yeah, I don't think anybody's gonna like it very much. The I think if I could wave a magic wand and do anything, um, what do you want from V5? I would love to make storytelling easier, onboarding as a storyteller easier for anybody who is curious about storytelling. Anybody who even wants to dabble in it, who wants to dip their toe into storytelling. I would like to make it easier and gentler process. And the same with playing. I would like to make learning to play, finding a group to play with, and having a fun experience playing just a little bit easier. We live in a world in which all of us are so incredibly busy and stressed and anxious, and we have so many demands on our time 24/7 that, I mean, yeah, any friction is too much friction for everything that we do. I would like to ease those frictions for people who are curious about telling stories and playing these games. I don't have specific concrete steps I would take at this moment now that I'm on the spot to do that, but the overall goal would be making it simpler, faster, easier, get to the fun part faster for everyone. Start telling the story with your friends faster and easier. Get to the collaborative story generation faster. Um, how we do that exactly, I'm not entirely sure, but a lot of my brain power is already consumed with figuring that out. Um, and I think another big chunk of my brain is thinking about what do we need next from V5. V5 is almost 5 years old now. It's
Wow.
actually five. No, it's 5 years old. It's August. Yeah, it's this August. It was 5 years old. So um, it's been out there half a decade, and I think a lot every day about what do we need to do next. I honestly think that we need more. We need to give more attention to setting.
Yeah.
What is the current situation tonight in various places of the world? What is happening in Singapore? What is happening in Kuala Lumpur? What is happening in Prague? What is happening in London now that it's been some time since the fall of London? What is happening in Buenos Aires? What is the current situation? Because I think that players want to know what the current situation is. They don't necessarily want or need to know thousands of pages of detail in any given city, but they want to know where it starts so that they can then springboard their own stories from those situations. Who is the Prince of Vancouver, BC tonight? Great. Thank you for letting me know. I will now tell my own story with my players jumping off this baseline. I
Yeah.
really do think we need to develop the setting of the world a little bit more in all directions of the compass and give people a little bit more information about what is happening because we know, but our resources are limited and we can't always get that information out there as much as we want. What's happening with the Gehenna War? What's happening with the Beckoning? What is happening with the Second Inquisition? All those answers are known and knowable, but we need to get that information out there. Likewise, what's happening with the clans? It's been a certain amount of time since the fall of London, since the first and second conventions of Prague, since the fall of the Vienna Chantry. It caused this tremendous upheaval and realignment among the clans. Is that still true tonight? Are the clans drifting farther apart? Are they coalescing farther together? What does it mean to be Bruja now, tonight, as
Yeah.
opposed to 10 or 20 years ago? What does it mean to be Ventru? Are those rivalries new? Are they still extant? Excuse me. Um, what does it mean when I'm embraced into Clan Ravenos now? And I think leaning into those clan interests and those clan worldviews, if you will, I think is beneficial, and I think it's time to go there.
Yeah.
Now that the dust has settled after the Vienna Chantry has done the big firework, it's time to look at all of that. So that's what I would do.
Looking forward to that. That would be really
Now, wait a
interesting.
minute, wait a minute. You just asked what I would do. That is by no means a guarantee. I am one very elderly kindred. But I think if I could do anything, that's what I would do. I would define the world a little bit more sharply so that our players could then tell their own stories in it.
I see. I think that's really really fun, and I think it corresponds well with the survey that we've seen. Also, there's been a
Mm,
lot of like cool answers there. Now that we have a question from Moore that is very interesting, and I feel like a
yeah,
lot of people are asking about it after Werewolf released, after Hunter released.
sure.
With both of these settings out, how would you recommend doing cross-spot games with the fifth edition setting?
I mean, if you must. Um, I'm trying to decide. There are so many ways to answer this question. I'm trying to decide in the time we have left what is actually useful for the people who are listening. What would benefit them at their tables.
What would
Um,
Jason Carl do?
Marty, are you in the office tomorrow? Because there are going to be words of multiple syllables.
I
Um,
am moving to a very speedy vacations. I am not going to be
yeah.
there.
See how it is. You see how it is, family. You see how it is. Okay,
Bye.
fine. Come all the way to Stockholm, and this is what happens. Um, what would Jason Carl do? So I'm of the opinion that each of these games, Vampire, Hunter, Werewolf, and games yet to come, all inform each other, depending on the story that the players want to tell. And it's super important if you're going to mix and match to have that conversation with the players first. It's one thing to spring a werewolf NPC on vampire players or a mage NPC on werewolf players, etc. That's all that information is provided already in the core books of the World of Darkness, and you don't need me to help you with that. But if you're going to go farther than that, if you're going to have vampire and werewolf player characters at the same table, or good heavens, hunters at the same table, then you need, I think, to do extra special preliminary care with your players and talk about what that means, because they're not completely compatible. They have different worldviews. They don't believe or want the same things. There are reasons for them to work together in a collaborative story, but those reasons are pretty sharply defined and generally short term. There are longer term reasons to do that, and that are, of course, reasons of family, comradeship, debt, romance, revenge, enmity, and all the gamut of human emotion. The best crossover stories, I think, are very purposeful. They're not random. A, a vampire, a werewolf, and a hunter do not happen to walk into a bar and start a chronicle. If you want to do it with that way, fantastic, and more power to you. But I think that the more powerful and more satisfying story is much more deliberate and personal. This vampire and that werewolf and these hunters, in specific and in particular, have a story to tell that happens in this place and at this time. And 9 times out of 10, the right people in the wrong place at the wrong time become heroes for about 30 seconds. And then it all falls apart. That's probably not a very useful nuts and bolts answer to the players who are asking, yeah, but how do I make rage dice work with hunger dice? For that, I don't have an answer. They're not meant to be 100% compatible in real time at your table. But the themes of these games, the humanity versus the beast, the destruction of the world versus the preservation of the future, and how do I keep my neighborhood safe from monsters? Those overarching themes do work together in broad strokes. And those stories you can tell. And that was about 2 minutes longer than I intended to give you.
It's great. I am enjoying it, and I am secretly planning in my head what I would do in order to have a romantic adventure with a werewolf and a vampire.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah, absolutely, right. I mean, that story, I got that story written in my brain already. I'm like, okay, it won't be New York by Night season 3, but it will happen.
at some point, it has to. But okay, let's. We have to. Unfortunately, we are already over time, but let's have some fun.
You bet.
Um, so, Real Sly Marbo is asking about your collection of cups and where did you get them?
My what?
Collection of your mugs, like the spooky mugs and cups.
Oh, coffee cup. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Never mind where my brain went. That's not worth talking about. Okay. My coffee cups. Yes. Of course. What else would you mean? Um, I
Nothing.
got my I got my spooky coffee cups at a little tiny local boutique in Burbank, California. I like to buy local whenever humanly possible. I don't like to buy from big box stores, big chain stores. It's unavoidable in the way we live in the world, but when I can avoid it, I do avoid it. And all of those weird, spooky, strange coffee cups came from a very tiny retail store near where I live. I don't know if that's helpful or not.
I mean, it is helpful for me because I am coming there one day and I will buy these coffee
Come
cups.
to Burbank by night? I don't know. I think you're going to find it's full of werewolves.
I'm fine with that. But we're gonna wrap it up with probably one of I don't know, but maybe one of your favorite kinds of questions. We had a question from McGee Bing Bong and the Grey Ghost 72.
Matt, McGee, Bing Bong.
Yes.
Are you serious?
Yes, McGee Bing Bong.
Awesome.
um, so what is your favorite wine and what wine is best served with Seattle by night?
Oh, wow. An easy question and an impossible question. Holy, okay. Mm, what is my favorite wine? That's super easy. My favorite wine in the entire world is Cabernet Franc. Um, if I can't get a good Cabernet Franc, I'll get a good Cabernet Sauvignon. But I like Cabernet Franc because it is incredibly complicated. It's really subtle and nuanced. It's easy to screw it up and make a bad one. But when it's done right, it is intense and complex and brooding. It is truly the Batman of wines in many
Batman
ways.
of wines.
And it is the Batman of wines.
The
And I
Van
find
Vector
that
of wines.
the Batman of wines, I find that the very best Cab Franc uh, wines are reflective of the kinds of vampire stories that I like to tell. Um, Complicated, brooding, dark, morally questionable.
Morally
In,
questionable wine.
inky dark around the edges. No clear answers. Um, the wine best served with Seattle by Night, though, isn't my favorite wine by no means. Good heavens, Seattle by Night is just a rollicking roller coaster descent into darkly humorous chaos. Right, that's an entirely different vibe from a Cab Franc. You're looking at some of the wilder Italian wines at that point. Um, I'm gonna say, what would I see now? I'm imagining Jasmine Boular's voice in my head and warning me not to get this wrong. The
Oh, you
revenge
got
of
it down.
Have you met Jasmine? You better not get it wrong.
Oh, I did.
Um,
I was
oh,
starstruck.
me too. I'm Star Trek every time I sit down with Jasmine. I'm like, I am not worthy to be on this stage. This is ridiculous. This is a human being of extraordinary talent and intelligence. Um, but for Seattle by Night, I recommend something a little bit lighter than a Cabernet Franc. You've got to go ratchet up the scale a little bit. I'm gonna go with believe it or not, I'm gonna go with a really honest Italian Chianti. And
Hmm.
I know that there's a lot of cliches about Chianti, but there are a few wines more honest. I think a few reds more honest than a Chianti. It does exactly what it says on the tin. You know exactly what you're going to get. Um, it can be humorous. It can change mood on you at the drop of a hat, depending on what you're serving it with. And it can, in the same glass, be incredibly poignant and dark, and at the same time, light and uplifting. And above all, Chianti is a wine I would describe as it's a wine of radical transparency.
Hmm.
Is it? It's exactly what it says it is. And so is Seattle by Night. You know exactly what you're going to get. This is the story of a bunch of vampires who are hobnobbing well above their station and who have goals that are out of alignment with the night around them and who are thrust in a situation not of their own making and yet must make the best of it. And I definitely think that's a Chianti kind of wine.
And I want to conclude this conversation by saying that we are not sponsored by any distillation companies, and we are not trying to convince anyone to drink unresponsibly or drink in general. Please drink responsibly if you do so. And thank you so much, Jason, for your insight. That was a great conversation. I had so much fun.
I had a great time too. Thank you. That went about 34 minutes longer than I thought I was going to. And I don't think we got to half the questions. So I think we're going to have to do this again.
Yeah.
Pardon me, relatively soon, maybe with some sub conversations. But Marty, thank you for arranging this. Thank you to the World of Darkness Discord team, Huddy, Archon Bun, Leo, and everyone who has helped keep this moving while building the plane while we are flying it. Um, and let me conclude by saying. It's a great joy and honor to be here with the family. The family could be anywhere, they could be doing anything, but they choose to spend their time with us. And we're grateful.
Thank you so much, Jason. We will let you rest your voice right now, and we will definitely do it again one day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye bye. Have a great evening, day, or time zone, wherever you are.
Good time zone, everyone.